Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new entitled parent stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Stop Messing with My Thermostat." Dude, this is not your house. For the last months I have been working as an intern in the HR department of a middle-sized company, and while it has been mostly an uneventful job, there have been some really peculiar moments. Most people up north may be suffering from a white Christmas, but down here in the equator we are melting from the heat, and in a highly humid town like the one I live in, it feels like the Amazon rainforest. Well, maybe that's because we are actually in the border of the Amazon rainforest. This would make you think any building will have their air conditioning units working full-time on full power, no? Well, not if Mr. Jeremy Johnson, our protagonist, could prevent it. Every day, Jeremy was the first to get in the building, enter the office he shared with other 5 guys, and set the thermostat to a not-so-refreshing 25°C 77°F. The device was on his workplace, so he basically had full control over it. When any of his co-workers complained about it still being really hot, he would set it to 20°C 68°F for about 10 minutes and then return it to his loved 25. If they changed it themselves, he would set it back once they returned to their desks. As childish as this may sound, this game lasted for about a month till an HR representative, your sweet narrator here present, had to intervene because this was getting out of hands. Formal complaints were done and the screaming matches were getting worse and worse, with people in other departments commenting on the issue. So, normal first step, I interview the 5 guys and they describe the problem I just told you about. Cue to the funny part, my interview with Jeremy. I will try to recreate it the best I can, although I may be a little biased. Me: "Hey, Mr. Jeremy, I am Latina Cinderella from HR. How are you?" Jay: "Fine." Me: "So, let's cut to the chase, about the thermostat." Jay: "What about it?" Me: "I describe him that complains against him. Having said this, we need to find a solution." Jay: "A solution for what?" The only problem here is that this peladitos, little kids, is a safe idiom, but in here it was used rudely, can't handle a little bit of heat. A detail I forgot to include, is that while Jeremy is in his early 40s, his co-workers are in between 24 to 30. Yeah, but that's the reason we have the air conditioning, sir, so that workers can be as comfortable as they can. Jay: "It's expensive." Our energy budget is able to cover for it, that's nothing you should worry about. In case we needed to make cuts, we will tell you. Jay: "Well, I can't handle the cold, it triggers my allergy." Maybe we can arrange a place change so that you are not close to the air vent, and, I don't know, maybe you can bring a thin sweater so that you don't get too cold. Jay: "I don't like sweaters. I am fine with the way I have the thermostat, why should I change it?" Because you are not alone in your office, Mr. Jeremy. And we can't let this fight affect your work environment. Jay: "I really don't get all this drama. I keep the same temperature at home and none of my kids complain or are allowed to change it. It should be the same here." I think at this point my face just made the must WTF expression imaginable because I could not believe the argument he had just said. Sorry? Mister, this is not your house, this is your workplace, and those are not your children, but your adult co-workers. Jay: "Then they should act like it." Okay, that's all I needed to hear, we will tell you what measures would be taken, have a good afternoon. So, after that weird conversation I talked to my supervisor and in the end, it was decided that Mr. Jeremy had 2 options. Change places in the office and leave the thermostat in the hands of the other guys, meaning he needed to deal with the cold. Moving to our backup office, basically an adapted supply closet normally used for extranumerary personnel we sometimes hired, also used occasionally used as a file warehouse, and whose only ventilation was a small fan. No windows. Surprisingly enough, Mr. Jeremy chose the first option, and while he is constantly nagging about his cold feet, at least they are not fighting to death anymore. The next one is entitled "Mum sells me a broken guitar because her baby can't play it." This story happened some years ago while I was living in the East Coast. I was driving back home from a friend's house and decided to take a detour through one of the nicer neighborhoods because it was the beginning of fall and I'm just a sucker for the scenery. While driving I just so happened to have found another thing that I go crazy for, a garage sale. With me having some money on hand, I decided that this was fate and pulled over to check it out. At first, I didn't really see anything special, just the kind of stuff you would expect to see at any garage sale. Old furniture, clothes, DVDs and other small items. But then in the corner of my eye I saw something that I just didn't expect to see, a guitar. I went in for a closer look expecting it to be some kind of cheap beginner guitar, the kind with a brand name you don't recognize. But no, what stood before me was an actual Gibson Les Paul. Side note, to those who don't know, Gibson is a very prestigious guitar brand name and Les Paul is possibly their most famous model type. This model of guitar is legendary for being the weapon of choice amongst god-level rock stars. Example, Slash from Guns N' Roses or Ace Frehley from Kiss. Now back to the story. She was beautiful. And yes, I refer to guitars as she. She was gold in color with white trim and looked kind of old but in really good condition. But what got me in an actual state of shock was the price tag. It said the price was $50. I couldn't help but think that the person selling this forgot to add another zero to the end of the price, as well as a 1 to the beginning, so I picked up the guitar and went up to the woman handling the sale to ask her about it. She didn't really look like a typical entitled parent, but her attitude and body language just radiated entitlement. It was like her aura was almost made out of pure smugness and hatred for the working class. Just by talking to her I couldn't help but feel that she was the kind of soccer mum that you would expect to yell at the coach, as well as the referee, other parents and maybe some of kids. But I digress. Me equals me, M equals entitled mum, me, excuse me ma'am, can I ask about this guitar? The price says it's $50, is that correct? M, yes, that's correct. Me, well, that's an unusually good price, is a reason for that? M, yes, it's broken. I figured someone could use it like a decoration in their man cave or something. Hearing that just broke my heart, but it also got me curious because I couldn't find anything physically wrong with the guitar. No cracks or any other signs of damage. I started asking more questions thinking maybe I could fix her later. However, it was at this moment that any and all logic began to die and roll downhill away from me. Me, can I ask what's wrong with it? M, yes, my baby can't play it. Me, excuse me? M, my son, he says it's unplayable. Me, oh, does he work with guitars like a technician or something? M, oh no, he can't work. My baby is only 12. Hearing that stunned me for a quick second, but I then decided to try to give the benefit of the doubt. I don't know this kid, so maybe he was one of those young musical virtuosos who got accepted to Juilliard early or something. Me, so, I take it your son is musically talented? M, oh, very much so. He plays that Guitar Hero game all the time. Me, what? M, oh, you know, that game where you play music. He's constantly playing that game and is always getting the high score on it. I kept a straight face, but my mind was turning into that meme of the woman trying to do math. Me, so, because of that, you got him a guitar? M, well of course. When you have a child as gifted as mine it's important that you nurture their gifts. Me, so, you think he knows what he's doing? M, he obviously knows what he's doing, so if he says it's broken, then it's broken. Listening to her talk made my brain hurt, but it also helped me decide to take the chance and buy the guitar. While paying, this woman went on a long insane rant about how the guitar was actually a gift from the kid's late grandfather from the dad's side of the family and how he must not like her son because he gave him an old hand-me-down guitar instead of a brand new one. Hearing all this legitimately upset me, but I just decided to just keep my mouth shut and leave. After getting home I immediately took the guitar, plugged her into my amp, retuned her, that was all the maintenance she needed, and played a few notes and chords. To my amazement she sounded perfect. It felt as if her soul was singing the praises of freedom. I spent the rest of the day playing and tripping out that not only have I purchased my first ever Gibson Les Paul, but I also only paid $50. But the story doesn't end here. A few weeks later, I made a friend at a party who was an actual guitar technician. I told him my story and he said if I wanted, he could appraise my guitar for me and tell me her true value. I took him up on the offer and the results blew me away. It turns out my baby was a vintage Les Paul from 1973, retailing at well over $3,000. He then asked me if I were interested in selling, but I told him there was absolutely no way I'm ever letting go of her. But the story still doesn't end here. Shortly after getting my baby appraised, I get word from a friend who turns out works in the same office building with the husband of M. She updates me about what she learned, and apparently M's husband is of course righteously pissed. It turns out not only did M sell a very expensive guitar for just $50 that was a gift from his father to her spoiled kid, but she also sold it without him knowing. Not only that, my friend informs me that M has also been looking for me. My friend tells me that M wants to find me so she can demand the guitar back. Not offer to buy it or even pay back what I paid. She wants to demand that I give it back for free because apparently I scammed her out of a priceless family heirloom and robbed her child's ability to play music. My friend said she didn't say anything about her knowing me, but then asked me if I wanted her to say anything to them about who I was. I tell her absolutely not. If she wants a guitar, she can buy a new one with the money I gave her, just like she planned. And I agree that this guitar is a family heirloom, but it's my family heirloom. Sorry, M. But if it means anything, if you're reading this, I named her Karen. The next one is entitled which thinks she can get away with assaulting an employee. Turns out she's very wrong about that. I'm one of the shift managers at a well-known and well-loved fast food establishment. We are famed for having some of the hardest working and most respectful employees in the industry. As a manager on duty, I make sure my employees know I have their back. That brings us to today. Our cast is as follows: me, ducking hate that guying, new guy, pretty cool dude who occasionally messes up, as we tend to expect from new hires. Awesome employee, I usually leave them in charge when we're working together because they know their stuff. Entitled which entitled kids, so today had been rather uneventful. The occasional spill here or there, someone got the wrong thing on their order, etc., etc. Most customers love us and understand when we mess up. We always make sure to make it right, no matter if it costs us a few bucks or 50. QEB. Now, I was in the manager's office looking over some catering orders due for that day. For some reason, it seemed the entire city of LA decided today was a fantastic day to order all the food in the house. No matter, it's good money. I was in the middle of trying to call someone in to give back of house some relief from all the massive orders they had to now make. Air comes in and tells me that someone's at front counter and wants to talk to me. I hang up the call, the person hadn't answered yet, and head to the front. There, I meet EB and her monster child who want. Stop screaming. EB, your employee is trying to scam us. I ordered a large ice cream cone, and he gave us a small. Ing looks petrified and isn't saying anything. Not wanting this interaction to continue, I say, I'm sure it was an honest mistake. We'll fix that for you right away. Ing immediately nods his head and heads to the ice cream machine. EB scoffs, an honest mistake, huh? Your honest mistake made my child cry. I demand you make that ice cream free. Me, ma'am, I can either give you a refund or remake the ice cream. Your choice. EB, what? How dare you? You really expect me to pay for it after your employee made a mistake? Me, with all due respect, it seems you already ate the other cone. Besides, at this point there isn't any proof that a mistake was made in the first place. We'll replace your ice cream or issue the refund. Ing is walking back with the cone at this point. EB's previously enraged demeanor quickly changed to an almost creepy sweetness. EB, okay, I'll take the cone. Thank you so much. I sense something off here, so I linger in the area. My spidey senses were on. Ing presented EB with the cone. As soon as he turned his back, I saw EB ready herself to throw the cone right at Ing. Luckily, my reflexes were fast enough to slap the cone right out of midair, into one of our soda machines. I internally cringed, knowing we'd have to do an extensive cleaning on that later. Not wasting time, I immediately turned to EB. Me, leave this restaurant right now. EB, but. Me, now. If you ever come back here, you will be turned away without question. EB gathers up her child who is now screaming even louder. EB, your food sucks anyways. I hope you go under. I decide escalating the situation would be pointless, so I just keep an eye on her until I can see her car driving down the street. I capture an image from the security footage to put in our do not serve list. Ing was shaken up but insisted that he was fine working. I gave him a 30-minute paid break so he could calm his nerves. This occurred all of 2 hours ago at this point, and my blood is still boiling. The next one is titled, My Repugnant Parents. I was trying to think of a good sub to post about what's been happening and what was on my mind lately. I guess this sub will do. I don't know whether my parents are entitled or more, I honestly cannot tell. I wish I could, but I guess you guys will know, and maybe my friends too, because I texted them about what my parents are like and they said that it was a good story for entitled kids. So here I am, telling through post about how my parents are and why I secretly resent them. This right here is why I think my parents are repugnant. They complained about 8-year-old me while I was in the same room as them, and complained in a way to sound like they were gossiping. Yes, this is something they did once. When I was little, maybe around 8 years old, I was in the kitchen with my mother and father. Don't know why I was in there, but I was guessing I just wanted a snack from the pantry or something. But while I was in the kitchen, my parents stood by the bench in front of me and started complaining, not arguing but complaining. Then I heard my dad say something about how bad my handwriting was, and my mum agreeing with him by saying something like, "Yeah, I know." What's worse, it sounded like they were grown adults gossiping like teenagers about an 8-year-old child over handwriting. Also, just for some clarification, around that time I was in grade 1 in primary school. My class only just started learning how to write in cursive. I know it sounds more like at the time I should have been in grade 2, but I was held back a year. I remember my parents say something about how I would write the letter O badly, saying something about me trying to connect the letters together, and when I connected the O letter to another letter, I'd write the loop line too long or too curly. Mind you that I only just started to write in cursive. My dad hated the fact that I was bad at math, plus neither of my parents don't realize that it's called a learning disability for a reason, which is linked to my mild autism. Oh, you thought that the fact that they gossiped about me was bad? Well, this is even worse. Just for some backstory, the primary school I went to was bad. The school curriculum and education system were just lazy and bull crap. I remember very specifically that for some reason around grade 1 we would sing out times tables to memorize them, but we only did that in grade 1, and the rest of the school years all the teachers did, especially in grade 3, was just a teacher literally giving us a lined piece of paper and said to do times tables for homework. That's all I ever did. All it did was dumb me, full stop. So, one day I was doing my homework, and my dad would usually help. I remember very specifically that I was horrible at math because I only knew very basic times tables, and that was it. It was so bad, it got to the point of either me and my dad arguing, my dad jumping to conclusions by assuming that I don't listen in class, or he'd believe that the school curriculum was bad because it was, and at the same time would say that but managed to make it sound like it was my fault. Mental abuse, yes, you saw this coming. I once did admit to my friends by text that my parents were awful for never understanding me, but I never mentioned that they were also straight up awful to the point of repulsiveness. Around about grade 4 I signed up for some sort of club that was open during recess or lunch that I'd go to once a week. However, one day I forgot to go, which isn't that big of a deal considering that it's only a club and I only forgot it once. It's not like I missed actually going to class or I forgot to do homework, but my mother made a big deal out of nothing. My mum picked me up after school and my mum asked how my day was. Then she asked how the club was? And when I confessed that I forgot, she started yelling at me. Cannot remember what she said fully, except for when we parked at a 24-hour store and bought ourselves something from there. My mum started getting impatient with me because I was taking my time in making a decision. I remember the cashier noticing it and standing there watching it and going, "Oh mum." Like she knew what was happening. Then when we got back into the car, I can't remember much else except for me having a meltdown and my mum threatening to leave me at the orphanage foster shelter that was near the shop we were at. Another time I was mentally abused was by my dad when I was also around the same age again. At the time I couldn't tie my shoelaces, still cannot, and one night I attempted to do so only for me to grow impatient, then my dad intervened. I also cannot remember much other than him mocking me and belittling me for getting impatient. After he did, I got upset and ran to my room and cried into my pillow. From my room I heard my mum confronting my dad. Can't remember what they were saying, but I do know for a fact that my mum was going off at him and I'm assuming she kept urging him to apologize, which took literally 2 attempts. The first time he attempted, he didn't even apologize. All he said was, "Stop those fake tears." The second time he did, he apologized and encouraged me to come out of my room. Don't know if it was because food was already on the table or if he was going to tell my mum he did it or wanted me to do homework. I can't remember anything else after that. They have no common sense plus humiliate me in public, so my parents think my hearing is damaged from listening to loud music with headphones on, saying that I'm going deaf. I'm not. Well, for starters, I may have hearing problems that started when I was 10/11, but when it started it has not changed. It didn't get better, but it hasn't gotten worse. Even if I am deaf, and if it was because of my loud music with headphones, that wouldn't be the only reason. When I was 3, I had grommets in my ears. After I had an operation, the doctor told them that they'd eventually fade away, which they successfully did, and I had no problems after that, until maybe when I was 10 or 11. I remember when I was around that age, I woke up at night and told my mum that my ears were hurting. It felt like there was constant ringing and banging, and it hurt so bad. I am pretty sure that it was an ear infection. It started off mild, but the pain would not stop. That night I told my mum about my ear problems. She said I could sit on the couch and watch the telly with her, which I thought, why not, so I did. But the pain in my ears progressed. I lied down in so much pain that I didn't even notice how cute my old dog was being that night, who isn't alive anymore. My mum kept saying, "Look how happy she is," and I wasn't able to respond to her. I just sat there and stared at her. The pain kept progressing to the point of me literally crying in pain and telling my mum that I might need to go to hospital. It was so bad that my mum agreed with me. But I didn't go to hospital. The pain calmed down a bit, but it was still there. I tried to go to sleep and got no sleep that night. I don't have as much ear pains as much now, except for maybe when me and the family are on very long car trips and the air gets to me and the ear pains kick in. Enough of the ear pain talk, and let's talk about the humiliation. One time when I was a preteen, maybe 12 years old, me and my mum had lunch at a donut shop. I went to go order my own hot chocolate and donut. So, when I tried to ask the cashier the typical question, without me being able to finish my sentence, my mum yelled over the top of her voice in public, "Use your manners and say pleaase." Not only was I uncomfortable, but the cashier was as well. I saw the look on her face. She was trying not to cringe. So, after I get my order, I sit on one of the tables with her and tried to confront her for embarrassing me. She uses the excuse, "Because you didn't use your manners," which I responded. I was going to say, "Please," but you interrupted. My mum was skeptical about it. Nowadays, whenever I go to the store with my mum, if I try to get customer service or try to buy food, I get nervous because I get scared that I might accidentally forget to use manners, and I'm scared my mother will go off at me again one day. Every time I go do something like that, I speak in a slightly quiet tone, even though the employees can manage to hear me. They prioritized my older brothers, so mind you, none of this were my older brothers' fault. Well, no, they weren't exactly the heroes of the stories, but they were never worse than my parents were. So, my parents would prioritize my brothers. Say for example, when my second oldest brother kept me up at night on his computer, I kept telling him to turn it down. If mum or dad intervened and tell him to turn it down, he wouldn't until an hour later. Once he literally was on his computer until 4 a.m. and he kept me up at that time. If he didn't keep me up, he would stop using his computer if it crashed. Now that he's not only moved out of my current room, his old room, he has also moved out to live with his girlfriend. Now when I have a late night, whether it be on the weekend, holidays or the school days, my parents, mainly my dad, tells me to go to bed. But when my brother was the same age as me, he'd stay up late on his computer talking to his friends. My brother at the time also picked up on their misunderstanding behavior. One time I heard my older brother say to his friends on video chat or Skype or something that I swapped the letter O with 0. This sounded too familiar to me, sounded like my parents complaining about me. They don't understand me, plus they make decisions for me, plus their expectations are confusing. 2020 was a very hard year for me. I remember how difficult remote learning was. The teachers certainly didn't help either, they just made it worse. One teacher had the audacity to leave out important information but told the rest of the kids. The reason why I wasn't on that video chat was because I ran late. I ended up finding out about that important detail 2 days later when the end product was due soon, when I went on video chat with her to tell her what was going on and that she made up the "I did it so you could problem solve." My mum also didn't understand. When I kept telling her how the teachers were no help, she shrugged it off as, "But you tend to leave things until later." Everything about that statement is complete and utter bullsh for so many reasons. Well, one of the reasons being is simply because I had a tendency of leaving things till later in the past doesn't necessarily mean I still do, and another thing is even if I did at the time leave it till later doesn't really excuse the teacher's actions. If anything, the teacher made it worse and would make it even worse if I did leave it till later. Another time my mum misunderstood me was when her and one of my teachers were discussing what I will be doing in year 10. It started off seemingly normal until my mum kept giving me ideas on what I should do, or aka she kept suggesting half of the stuff she'd think would be good for me. There were some of the things I was choosing that technically suit me, like music performance, art, etc., because they're my interests, and yeah, some of the things my mum gave me ideas about I refused but changed my mind when I thought that it didn't sound that bad. But most of the stuff my mum chose for me went according to her expectations of me, not high of low but just the what I think expectations. When it came the time for me to choose my VET VCE subject, my mum chose it for me. I wanted it to be music performance, but my mum suggested it be animal studies. And when I asked why, she said, because you're good with animals. Me being good with animals isn't an excuse for her to choose something for me according to your expectations. Then when it was time where it was finished, the teacher asked me if it was okay and I said yes. My mum then says something about me having animal studies as a good thing for me so I could change my mind about being a musician as a career. What's worse, my dad does almost the same thing. One time me and the family went out for tea, and when I chose something from the menu I wanted, my dad ended up changing the order without telling me. He said, "We decided to give you fish and chips instead because the wedges will be too big." If they didn't choose things for me, they would straight up not understand what I go through, let alone me. One day in year 7, the teachers gave me a mental break after I lashed out at a student who I thought was laughing at me. That student bullied me that year. I let slip out, "I'm going to kill you," when I was meant to say something else. The teachers made it easier for me though, my dad didn't. You'd think that it would be fine, right? Of course, it would be. It's a mental break. So, the teachers called my mum and my dad. My mum was more understanding about it, unlike my dad. At tea, he said it was ridiculous for me to have a mental break, like the idiot he is. So yeah, that's it. Those are my parents for you.